What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Mtg, we like it a magic. It is another one of those top 3 decks of the week videos. And let me just start by saying, I'm really glad that Bloomburrow is the kind of format where I actually get to do one of these videos every single week. It's not always like that, but new decks are coming out of the woodwork, dropping out of the sky. You got to get to one side just every day now. The format is evolving. So it's a lot to keep up with, but it's also a lot of fun to do these videos and see new decks and show them to you and all that. It's one of my favorite things about being a Magic player. So with that in mind, we actually have 4 decks to look at today. One of them being an honorable mention. It's the one on your screen. Now, this deck didn't have the kind of impact that I'm always looking for when I do these videos, but impact isn't the most important thing. Sometimes just being interesting or a new take on an old idea or a deck we've never seen before is enough to make the video for me because I'm interested in a deck like this, right? In this case, it's that middle thing, an old idea that we're seeing executed in a new way. This is 5 Color Legends by Guillaumed19, I believe is how you pronounce this MTGO user's name. And they did get 31st place in an MTGO challenge. Okay. Not top 8 or anything, but they were there. They showed up, did their level best, and the deck looks really cool, and I think they need to be, you know, honored for that. So here's tip of the hat to you, Guillaume. Now, I think this deck is cool and can be iterated on, has potential, right? And I like potential. So this is a Joda deck. You've seen Joda decks, right? This is the 5-mana 5/5 legendary human wizard guy, and legendary creatures you control get +X, X being the number of legends that you control. And whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, you exile cards from the top of your library till you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value, and you cast that card for free. Pretty ridiculous little ability if you can get it to pop off, but mostly you just want the Anthem effect a lot of the time, because this can give all your legends like +4, +4, +6, some ridiculous number, right? And you just kind of alpha strike. So what does a team of legends look like nowadays, right? Well, we're going to start on the bottom end of the curve with just the one of Tiny Bones so we can get on the board, right? We've got 2 Rona, Herald of Invasion in here so that we can discard this Atraxa Grand Unifier when we need to, but sometimes we don't need to. We can just ramp into it. More on that in a second, but Rona helps us get the cards that we want, right? Also in the 2-drop slot is a single copy of Malcolm. And that's basically all the 2-drop and 1-drop creatures, which is a little alarming, but this is best of 3. We'll get there, right? We've also got 3 copies of Glissa Sunslayer to try to stop aggro cold when it's attacking. We've got Urtai Resurrected as kind of a, you know, removal spell, counter spell some of the time, good tempo against opponents wanting to play big spells. Glarb is in here. This will also allow us to like get Jodas and stuff off the top of our library. Sheldred's off the top of our library. Omnath off the top of our library. By the way, we're playing 1 Sheldred and 1 Omnath, Locus of All, in this deck, just in case you wanted to know. But Glarb will also help us cast, or at least let us see, things like Atraxa, Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, Urtai, Aclazotz, all this on top of our library. Now, we're running one-ofs, the Aclazotz and the Elish Norn and the Urtai and the Glarb, but we have all 4 copies of Atraxa Grand Unifier because this is actually an Atraxa deck in disguise. You know, we've seen these decks with like Heaped Harvest and, you know, even Invasion of Zendikar and all that this season, right? Trying to ramp into Atraxa and playing Sunfalls along the way, Domain Ramp Lives, all that. This is still a 4 Atraxa deck trying to ramp into Atraxa, mostly through the use of Relic of Legends, the 3-mana artifact that taps for a mana of any color, but you can also tap an untapped legendary, dude, to add a mana of any color. So if we curve out, we can really cast an Atraxa ahead of schedule most games, right? And remember that this too also taps for mana. Rona untaps whenever we cast, you know, certain things. So we can always like use extra mana from Rona to help us get that mana. We've got Ancient Cornucopia as a 3-of, so 7 different 3-mana rocks in this deck to help us ramp into the Atraxa. But, you know, there's enough gold cards in here too that Ancient Cornucopia is going to gain us a fair amount of life, keep us in the game, while Relic of Legends is going to help us ramp a little bit more reliably into that Atraxa. There's also 4 Go for the Throat to have a serviceable removal spell in the deck. Annie joins up to double up on, you know, triggers while also being a removal spell. Leyline Binding is a removal spell, and Rakdos joins up is our reanimator spell for mostly Atraxa, but it could also be Joda or any number of other legends in the deck. So really, really cool build here. We get down to the lands and, you know, those have to be a mess. I don't envy the person making this deck, but, you know, Plaza of Heroes needs to be in here. Fabled Passage to make sure you get what mana you do need when you need it, and then at least 1 of each basic land to make sure you can Fabled Passage correctly. So we've also got things like Shadowy Backstreet, Raucous Theater, Lush Portico, Commercial District. These all help make sure that we hit Leyline Binding correctly. Same thing with Underground Mortuary, Thundering Falls. These are all, you know, basic land types basically. So they help make sure that that Leyline Binding is actually a decent removal spell. In the sideboard, we've got Brother Brotherhood's End as a removal, a sweeper, basically, that can also take out certain decks in this format just by getting rid of all the artifacts. Cut Down is in here as a play set in the sideboard to make sure we can get rid of all those aggro creatures. Lithomantic Barrage in here against the blue-white decks. Glistening Deluge, yet another little sweeper thing here for the aggro decks. And then Invasion of Fiora, which is a sweeper that can leave all of our legends on the board, which is really, really sexy. So, cool deck here. I do like the way the sideboard's constructed, but I do think the thing needs to be worked on a little bit more, and I think that it has places to go. I do think that this is a strategy that can do something for you in current standard. We just got to put it together exactly right. I think going all in on the Atraxa is probably where we want to be. I'm not even sure this deck needs Joda, to be honest, but it's good to have another win condition, right? So altogether like it, and hope that it'll, hit the drawing board, come back fresh, and get that top 8 we know it can get. Up next is Talented Vraska Combo. This got 7th place by a player named Misplaced Ginger in an MTGO challenge this week, and it looks really cool. It's basically a Golgari shell with a one-shot combo that kills immediately as soon as it hits the table. So it all revolves mostly around Innkeeper's Talent, first of all. This is just a good Magic card, right? It rewards you playing creatures, has, some relevance throughout the entire game. All of its modes are good, and they're worth leveling into. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on a guy you control. You get a Luminarch, Aspirant, Fight, Rigging, whatever. For a green mana, permanent you control with counters on them have Ward 1. And then the important thing, 4 mana to level it to 3. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. This means a lot of things. When you read the card, you're like, oh, you double the amount of counters that are put on things. And that means that at the beginning of combat on my turn, one of my guys gets 2 +1/+1 counters. That's pretty cool. But what this actually does is it makes a lot of planeswalkers eligible to ultimate the turn they come down, because it also puts double the amount of loyalty counters on planeswalkers. This works really, really well with Vraska Betrayal Sting. I'm just going to read the ultimate on this. If target player has fewer than 9 poison counters, they get a number of poison counters equal to the difference. Now, this means you'll play your Vraska. It will get 12 loyalty counters, right? Because you've leveled up your Innkeeper's Talent all the way. It enters with double the amount of loyalty counters. So 12 loyalty counters. You -9 it, and they would normally get 9 poison counters. But again, you double the amount of counters put on anything that gets counters. So in fact, your opponent will get 18 poison counters right then and there. And I've seen a lot of people, because I posted about this on Twitter this week and actually got a ridiculous amount of engagement, like 700 likes or something. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. If you saw it, you're awesome. Going Magic the Gathering Twitter viral is always fun. But a lot of people in the comments of that tweet basically saying, like, is this actually good? Well, it got 7th place in an MTGO challenge. It got 10th place in another MTGO challenge. It got, I think, 12th place in another MTGO challenge. So it's working its way up. It is a way to build Golgari. You're not all in on this combo or anything. Not at all. You're just a normal Golgari deck. Happens to have 2 copies of Vraska, because a normal Golgari deck already plays Innkeeper's Talent anyway, because it is a very good Magic card. So, if you find yourself in the situation where you aren't able to finish with damage, or you're in, kind of hot water with your opponent, they've been able to get rid of or sunfall away all of your creatures, well, against your control opponent, just spend the mana to level all the way up Innkeeper's Talent, and then drop that Vraska if it gets through the counter shields or whatever other deck you're playing against, some other mid-range pile you're sort of top decking against. Get the Vraska down, and suddenly there's really nothing your opponent can do. They lose the game. So really interesting sort of, backdoor late game combo to make sure that you can secure wins almost out of nowhere. Again, with cards that are good anyway. Innkeeper's Talent's good anyway, and to be honest, Vraska's good anyway too. It's a, removal spell up to 3 times. It's card draw. That's all awesome. So it's not like it's embarrassing to play Vraska in the first place, right? Aside from that, you also get Liliana of the Veil in this deck, which you can ultimate immediately as well, if you want to, once you have Innkeeper's Talent leveled up. But it too is just a solid Magic card that functions as a removal spell. The rest of our deck is just Golgari, right? We've got Aclazotz in here. Bristly Bill is a one of in this version. It doesn't show up everywhere. but it is a one-up in this version. You've got Caustic Bronco, and this is seeing a lot of play nowadays. You've got the 4 Deep Cavern Bat, as you would expect to see. Copy of Sheldred in here, 2 Preacher of the Schism, some Mosswood Dread Knight, as you would expect to see, some Glissa. Again, all of this is just sort of straight up and down Golgari. The deck also has Duress to make sure it can get counterspells in, Sunfalls and stuff out of the opponent's hand. Gix's Command in here is a pseudo sweeper that can just one-side the opponent. Pillage the Bog to make sure we get some good card selection. It can also help find combo pieces if that's what we're going for at the time. Innkeeper's Talon is a 3 of, and then we've got 3 Go for the Throat, 3 Cut Down, and a Bitter Triumph for a pretty well-rounded removal suite. So really awesome looking deck here. I like Golgari with a little bit of dimension. I like Golgari with a late game engine that can just pop off, you know, and just win. Seems really, really good. Just awesome. Just really, really cool build of a Golgari deck in a way to, again, make this deck a little different when it very much, in my opinion, it needed, you know, a way to sort of branch out and not be just Golgari, have, you know, something it can actually do late, and really got it here. As far as the sideboard goes, another Uncle Aclazot's, Choking Miasma's our sweeper. We've got a cut down, 2 more Duress against Control, Hostile Investigator, a full playset's worth of Liliana. We've got 1 copy of the 7 mana Nissa that you can make 5 mana. Really cool card here. Terra Sunder, good sideboard card. Virtue of Persistence, good sideboard card. Tranquil Throwback. Again, we're just looking at a Golgari sideboard here. So again, if you're kind of squirmy about the idea that this combo seems a little over the top and Christmas Slam, whatever, just know that you're not all in on the combo. You are trying to win an honest, fair game of mid-range Magic with a Golgari deck, playing all the same cards it normally does. You just got an extra trick up your sleeve, and that's one of the things I like the most about this deck. All right, up next, we've got Azorius Artifacts by Hamuda, first place in an MTGO challenge. Again, everything old is new again. This is kind of a week of a lot of people going back and trying out older strategies from last season and having some success. We've actually seen 2 different Dimir sort of tempo decks, or mid-range decks, really, kind of Gix decks with Spyglass Siren and Deep Cavern Bat, and those decks, right, have a lot of success in different MTGO challenges and league results this week, you know, plus a couple of other decks that are sort of back from the past, Samurai Jack and all that. So this is one of them, an Azorius mid-range artifacts thing, kind of, right? Kind of has the Boros philosophy of get some artifacts on the board, tap them down, make Warden of the Inner Sky large and all that stuff. And to that end, there's also the 4 Novice Inspector in here, right? But there's also 4 Spyglass Sirens. So we have 8 different 1-drops, just like old school Boris, back when they had Epicure, right? Before rotation, we have 8 1-drops that are capable of creating artifacts. But there's also Regal Bunnycorn, which gets huge with all these artifacts just being created willy-nilly, right? You know, on turn 2. This can be a 3/3 very easily. Turn 4, sky's the limit. You know, there's also Mockingbird, which can be a flying Regal Bunnycorn, or it can be another copy of Steel Seraph, which is equally sick. It can be another Warden of the Inner Sky, which is also awesome because it already has the flying just kind of packaged in, you know. Love that. Steel Seraph, by the way, is an amazing card with Regal Bunnycorn, or, you know, anything really. You know, you give your Warden that's like a 5/6 lifelink for the turn, and you get in, you know. So Steel Seraph just goes really well with, you know, our 2 premier large creatures. And then Mockingbird can be any of our 3 important creatures, like Steel Seraph, Warden, or Regal. But if you need another artifact, or you need a flying blocker or something like that, you can just pay 1 mana for your Mockingbird and copy a Novice Inspector or Spyglass Siren. Really like the work Mockingbird's doing in this deck. But there's also the boat. It could even be a boat, and right now it is. Subterranean Schooner is a 3 of in this deck. Cruel Bull on, you know, turn 3 with any of our 1-drops, all right? And we don't care too much about having to tap down a Novice Inspector, Spyglass Siren, or whatever. And they will explore and get larger or whatever. So awesome. Spring-Loaded Saw Blades is kind of a removal spell that can also be a 5/5. You know, why not? Case of the Filch Falcon, also in this deck. Is just a 2 of. You'll see this in this deck, you know, historically in anywhere between a 2 and a 4. And this time they worked in 2 copies of it. This can be a 4/3 flyer, but it's also, you know, 2 permanents on turn 1 for your Regal Bunnycorn, whatever. Case of the Gateway Express is our other big removal spell. That's also an Anthem effect. Sweet. Zoetic Glyph, though, is kind of the premier card in the deck. It can take any of our clues or maps or whatever we're getting off of all our creatures or whatever and turn them into 5/4s. And that's nuts. It's very, very, very good. So really, really cool altogether. To discover 3 when it leaves the battlefield is sick, too, because all the stuff in our deck costs, you know, 3 or less. So Really, really awesome deck. Good to see it back with not necessarily a ton of new stuff, just Mockingbird, right? But apart from that, the deck doesn't necessarily need new stuff. You know, we're all kind of focused on the new and what's cool in Bloomburrow, and I like to see those decks pop up, obviously, but it's also cool to see people flex, you know, just one or two brand new cards and prove that, you know, these old decks are still kind of viable in the meta. I want as many decks to be viable in the meta as possible. So again, weeks like this, I'm actually totally down for and kind of excited by too. They cut a land from the mana base. There's only 23 in here. That should be enough to get by. And then the sideboard down here is 2 Lorn of the Third Path. Extremely important card. I think you could main deck it nowadays. A couple of Get Lost to have some more just good spot removal. Same thing with Destroy Evil. Disdainful Stroke is in here to counter large spells. Negate is in here to counter just about anything that would hurt us. Deshana's Tidebinder, obviously a cool little tempo-y creature. And same thing with Werefox Bodyguard to give us a little bit more removal. And cool creatures for like Mockingbird to target as well. So awesome little deck. By the way, Lauren's a sweet target with Mockingbird too. So cool deck, really well thought out here, and actually seems like, especially once you get to the board, it has more dimension than the average, you know, blue-white artifacts deck from just a couple of months ago. But to close this one out, let's look at mostly mono-white tokens here. There is one red card in this deck. Last week, we saw basically completely Boros, right? Urabrass Forge in the deck, it got cut from this list. Lightning Helix in the deck got cut from this list. Most of the red cards cut from this list. And as a matter of fact, a new one added that hadn't been in the Boros decks before, and you see it on your screen. We'll get to it in a second. This is mostly mono-white control, tokens, whatever. This time by Tulio Haughty, I believe is how you're going to pronounce that. Miguel and Tulio. Tulio and Miguel, mighty and powerful gods. This is a sweet-looking deck that harkens back not just to the Boros Tokens decks from the first couple of weeks of the format, but also to the mono-white control decks that we saw midways through the last standard rotation that kind of came out of nowhere and then fell off after about 4 months, right? And these, again, this reminds me a good bit of those decks, but it's got a fair amount of action in it. It's not all just like sweeper, sweeper, sweeper. Oh, there are some sweepers, but basically this deck is just like the Boros decks from last week in that it's trying to generate sort of passive every turn tokens while also keeping the board clear. It's trying to have its cake and also eat it too, although I'm not sure that this one plays the carrot cake that the Boros decks did. No, it doesn't. It does not, in fact, have its cake and eat it too. It cuts the carrot cake, but it... So many puns, but yeah, this deck plays Beza, the Bounding Spring, as sort of its premier 4-drop, but there's other good ones it can play too. Beza is just a good way to get a couple of different token types into play because the deck wants tokens, right? Beza is a great curve after you play, say, a character, what is it called? A caretaker's talent. I always want to say carekeeper's talent. It's not what that's called. But yeah, you play caretaker's talent on 3, you play Beza on 4, and you're bound to get a token some way, somehow at that point. So then you'll draw a card. And maybe later you'll be able to copy one of them fish tokens or copy one of them treasure tokens, and that's fine. So it'll also give you some card advantage, a little bit of life against the aggro matchups. These are all things you want. But your other 4-drop is Archangel Elspeth. Just a couple of copies of this, but it's in pretty much every version of the deck, whether it's mono white or Boros, because it creates a 1/1 lifelink dude every single turn. Its -2 is very, very good, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. Beza becoming a 6-power flyer just ends games as well. But, you know, mostly you're wanting to, like, generate value, draw cards off Caretaker's Talent, whatever. Eternal Wanderer is in this deck. It was not in most of the Boros piles, but it does find a home in here. A pseudo-sweeper that also makes a thing every turn. Seems like it would be perfect for any version of this deck. I was a little surprised the Boros ones weren't playing it, but I assume they think they can win without it. Fortune Loyal Steed is also in this deck. Kind of interesting, right? You can saddle this, and that means you can blink a Novice Inspector, a Frontier Seeker, an Imidane's Recruiter, a Beza, a Lauren. All the cards in the deck are technically blinkable, all the creatures at least, for an advantage. And so this can do some work for you, but it's mostly a 4 toughness creature that scries 2 when it comes into play. Fixes your draws for the next couple of turns, make sure you hit the land drops you need and all that, or make sure you hit your Beza next turn. All that's really good, and it can't be cut down, can't be lightning striked, blocks well against aggro, just a all-around decent creature stat-wise. So I like this inclusion. Frontier Seeker also makes sure that we get our lands when we need them. That's pretty important, and we do have a mount. we can reveal a fortune with a Frontier Seeker. So it's a way to get a fortune, and that's kind of nice too. There's also Novice Inspector. It creates a token that matters for Caretaker's talent. Lorn of the Third Path is a main deck card in this deck, and there's plenty of reasons in this format why you'd want to do that. And then a single copy of Imidane's Recruiter, because there are going to be turns where we put a couple of tokens into play, or we're trying to recover from a sweeper or something like that. And just the extra Lava Axe worth of damage. We got 2 guys plus the Imidane's Recruiter. So like the extra 5, 6, 7 damage we'll get in because of this card existing is really, really important in some games. It can come in clutch, and it also makes 2 tokens. And that's important for the Caretaker's talent, right? So aside from that, let's look at Caretaker's talent. I keep talking about it. So whenever one or more tokens you control enter, draw a card, only once per turn. But of course, you pay a single mana, and you create a token that's a copy of a token. So a treasure, a clue, a creature token, whatever. And then for 4 mana, all your creature tokens get +2/+2. Awesome in this deck. You're making 3/3 lifelinks with Archangel Elspeth. That's awesome. White Sun's Twilight is in here, but no Sunfall. We actually cut a great deal of the sweepers from this deck, and we're a little bit more creature focused, which I think some of you will be like, oh, thank God. But we can play White Sun's Twilight to sweep the board. Get Lost is a 4 of in here. Virtue of Loyalty is a 4 of in here, as you might expect. Creates a token. Anthems are tokens every turn. Just a really hard card to get around once it's on the table. And then Lay Down Arms, which I actually think might be the best reason to make this deck mono white. I really do. It used to be in the red-white deck, you'd see a lot of like Torch the Tower in the early slots, and sometimes you don't want to sack that token. Sometimes, it's not enough damage. So Lay Down Arms just takes out literally any creature and exiles it forever, and you do not care because you're a wave of inevitability. You do not care that they gain 3 life. So really sick card. And again, I really think the best reason to go mono white and make sure that you have as many planes as possible in your deck. Aside from that, though, we've got 2 Mirrex, makes tokens. Fountain Port, 4 of, makes tokens. Why not? 14 planes in the deck and 4 Elegant Parlors, both to help us cast the Imidane's Recruiter and to be a planes. So there's 18 total planes in here for Lay Down Arms. We should be able to make that work. As far as the sideboard, Boonbringer Valkyrie. Well, let me come up here so you can actually see the cards in the sideboard. Boonbringer Valkyrie is against aggro decks. It's just an unbeatable card. Destroy Evil takes out large creatures and also enchantments. Another Lauren makes sense. Sunder the Gateway is a card we're seeing in a lot of sideboards right now. We can bust up artifacts, which is good. Let's do that. Takasia's Welcome is in here basically as copies 5 and 6 of Caretaker's talent. Stone Brain to take out very specific threats from our opponent's decks. Temporary Lockdown. Yeah, sometimes you'd see this in the main deck of the Boros decks, but this has so many more things that can be locked down in its own deck that we're just going to refine this to the board. Same thing with Sunfall. We have so many things, so many creatures in this deck that we don't necessarily want a Sunfall, especially if we did manage Vasa on curve. We don't really want to Sunfall it away in most games, right? It can take it from there. So Sunfall can be a dead card in the, in game 1, but it can also be a needed card in 2 and 3. So we'll play a couple of copies of it. And that is, again, mostly mono white control. This got 2nd place, which is, you might notice, not as good as the 1st place that the last deck we looked at got. So why is this the best deck of the week? Well, because it's had the most success over the week of all the decks we've looked at. Not only has this gotten 2nd place, this build of the deck, but it's also top-8'd multiple other MTGO challenges. It's had the most success in sort of variating on MTGO League results, right? It's got a lot of 5-0s too. So you can see a bunch of different versions of this deck kind of being built. A lot of people cutting the red right now. I'm still not sure that's what you want to do. I think Lightning Helix isn't the best card in the world, but I do think Urabrass Forge is a very, very good Magic card. So I'm not sure if this is exactly what you want to be doing, but it is a really, really cool build of the deck. You don't get to see cards like Fortune, Loyal Steed, and Fortune Seeker in a Magic the Gathering deck in Standard very often. So, and these are good cards, right? So I just really like the cut of its hair. I think it's a cool deck, and I wanted you to know about it. So that's all 4, really, of the decks of the week, and here's hoping we get 4 more brand new decks next week to look at. But let me know how you felt about everything. If you've got any crazy decks that you've seen out there, or you've got one kind of you're working on, just waiting in the wings with it, let's all know down there in the comments section. Go ahead and give the game away. We're all ears, and we want to hear about it. But that's all I've got for now. Lots of projects coming up. So subscribe to the channel. Do the things. Hit the like button before you leave. Don't leave yet. Hit the like button and then leave. It's fine. It's totally fine. You can check out the Patreon. $1 a month is all I ask for. I'm worth it. That's all I've got for this one, though, guys. I'll see you later. Deck list in the description. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.